Hello and welcome to Socially Conscious Sports, a winning team. I'm Hannah Gordon, your moderator for today. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer and General Counsel of the San Francisco 49ers. And in that work, I have the pleasure of working with the Foundation's EDU STEAM program. So I'm particularly excited to be joined by three amazing women today. Kimberly Bryant is the founder and CEO of Black Girls Code, a nonprofit organization dedicated to changing the face of technology by introducing girls of color to computer science. Kimberly has been recognized nationally as a thought leader for her work. She's been awarded the Jefferson Award for Community Service, and the Obama White House honored her as a champion of change. Tiana Hawkins is a social justice advocate and professional basketball player for the Washington Mystics. Born and raised in DC, Tiana attended the University of Maryland, where she was an all-ACC player. She was drafted 6th overall by the Seattle Storm in 2013 and is a WNBA champion. She is involved with the Mystics' Demystifying STEM program and has been one of the leaders of the WNBA's social justice initiatives in the bubble. Tamika Tremalio is the managing principal for Deloitte's Greater Washington practice, the area's largest professional services firm, where she works with most of Washington's marquee brands. Tamika is active in many of the community's most influential organizations and civic initiatives. She serves as the president of the WNBA's Players Association Foundation and works with the Mystics as part of their Demystifying STEM program. Welcome, ladies. So nice to be with you today. Here they all come. I feel like we're in like the Miss America pageant. I was like waiting for them to come on stage. This is exciting. Tiana, I think we're all dying to know, what was the bubble like? How has the last 6 months been for you?
The bubble was interesting. It was unique, to say the least. But I think we did a lot of great things this season. When we went down to the bubble, everybody knows we was going down for the WNBA season, but our main focus was bringing social justice to the light. And I think as a whole, as a league, as a whole, we've done a great job with keeping our voice and allowing our voice to be heard through our game.
Absolutely. And I want to kind of follow up a little bit on that. I feel like the WNBA players have really led the charge for the last several years in social justice and racial equity work. What is it about WNBA players that makes you guys or you ladies, such leaders?
Well, I think the biggest thing is the fact that everyone is unified. We all know what we stand for, and we all agree with one another that our voice needs to be heard, and we need to stand out loud and clear.
That's
so
awesome.
The biggest thing is unity in the league.
And Kimberly and Tamika, what has the last 6 months been like for you? How are you adjusting to shelter in place? How is this impacting, the work that you do in making sure that young people have access to computers, to internet, et cetera?
Well, I think for Black Girls Code and myself as the CEO, it's certainly been a challenging past 6 or really like 8 months. I'm in our office today, but no one else is here but me. We've been remote, and we also had to take all of our classes offline and put them in a virtual setting. So it's been a period of really some significant transition for the organization, but also I love what Tamika said, because it's also about us realizing as an organization we had to step up at this moment and provide access to our community. So we knew that all of our families were also at home. The students were not in classrooms. They were not able to continue even coming into the BTC community, maybe even not going into their school system. And we wanted to be there to provide support. And so we quickly pivoted into virtual offerings, and really that was driven by our need to serve our community and be there when they needed us. So it's been a lot kind of navigating what's happening externally in the world right now, but also it's a time where we felt called to action.
No, Yeah, and absolutely, Hannah. As we talked about it at Deloitte, of course, the transition itself, I think, has gone fairly well. We had been preparing ourselves for some time in terms of innovation and technology, the things that we've been talking about at this forum for the last couple of days. So in that regard, I think, we were prepared to actually go virtual at any point. We do that a lot of times with our clients, and through the use of artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things, it had been something that we used to deliver audit, tax consulting, and advisory services for years. And this just sort of sped up our time frame in terms of how we could do that and how we could get all of that accomplished. But I want to be very clear that it has not been easy. Certainly the shelter in place was something that was brand new and different for all of us. We struggle with being a wife, a mother, a business person, being responsible to our society. And so all of those things, I think, caused many challenges for all of us. And the lines got blurred oftentimes. You may see someone running behind me any minute, right? Because there was no real distinction between being at home and being at work. And so it was really definitely a transition.
That makes sense. And I'd love to kind of backtrack for a moment, because when I look at sort of ballers like each of you, I always want to know, like, how did you get here, right? Like, I see you in this star moment now, and I would love to know, like, what was your path? Like, who or what influenced you to become the woman that you are today? So maybe we'll go in reverse order this time. Tamika, Kimberly, and then Tiana.
Yeah. Hannah, I love the thought of being a baller, right? I don't think I've ever been called that. So I'll take it.
I'm the only one who literally gets to claim it, but I feel like we're all trying to, like, soak in the glow right now.
Yes, that's good. That is great. Well, I would bet, just like all of us that are on this call right now, that we probably had mothers who, forced us, encouraged us to be better than good, right? It was important that we were amazing. And so if someone was walking, you should be running, all of those things. You had to always exceed expectations. And quite frankly, education was the equalizer for me. And so I think being where I am, first of all, I recognize that it is not that we do none of this alone, right? That we are given opportunities because people give us exposure and the opportunity to do things that we may not have been able to do on our own. But it's also really important that when we're given the chance to perform, that we do perform. And all of the women, of course, who are here today are where they are because they have performed. But we won't be where we are for long if we don't remember to lift others up. And that it's important that we're bringing others up as we're climbing as well. So that's, sort of part of what Tiana mentioned, and giving back to society and making sure that those things are happening. I think I learned that from a very, very young age.
I love that. I'm going to follow along on Tamika's thread about loving that I'm being called a baller, because I grew up as a kid that really idolized folks like Tiana. Like, I love sports, but I just didn't have the athletic ability to do any of the sports, although I try my very best to do so. It's really the academics that allowed me to kind of stick out and shine. And as a kid, that's really where I kind of found myself being able to resonate and really focusing on math and science, and thinking that I was going to be a lawyer or something using math and science, and ended up in engineering as a platform throughout my career and to different opportunities in leadership. So I think for me, it was really about looking at those other women that came before me or alongside of me that were really excelling in math and science. I didn't know about folks like Katherine Johnson, unfortunately, coming up. But I did know Mae Jemison, and I did know some of the other women that were really strong scientists and engineers, even in my personal community. And those were the folks that really gave me a role model, if you will, of folks that I really wanted to emulate in my career. And I think that's why within BGC, we really try to shine a light on other women that are leading in various fields, not just technology, because we realize how important that is for the girls that are participating in our programs.
Well, for me, I have
the baller.
I'm the baller, so I have best of both worlds. Basketball has presented so many opportunities for me, but not just playing basketball and being able to see the world, but it's also put me in a position for life after basketball. And with that being said, our players union had a partnership with Microsoft last year, and I was able to become an apprentice with Microsoft, where I'm currently a software engineer. So that's what I'm doing right now, and that's how I got into it. Also, a few years back, I started my degree in cybersecurity technology, and it's on hold right now because I'm a mom and I'm a professional basketball player, so I don't really have that much time. But when I was doing my degree, I fell in love with programming, and I learned the Python language, and I also learned C#, which was created by Microsoft. And so that's what I'm doing right now. A little bit of coding, a little bit of testing, a little bit of everything, just to see what avenue I want to take once I stop playing basketball.
Wow, there are going to be lots of us trying to hire you. Microsoft, watch out.
That's incredible. What first got you into STEM, Tiana?
It was, so my mom, she's actually a project manager in information technology. So I was talking to her with my aspirations growing up. I wanted to be a federal agent. And as I'm getting older, the chances of that happening is very slim. So I told her, but I want to do something still along the lines with criminal justice and maybe technology, because I'm really good. Like, for me, technology comes natural. So she said, well, maybe you should look in cybersecurity because you're, trying to beat threats. So I did a little bit of research as to what I can find that would be of my interest. And I found out that cybersecurity is very broad. You could do almost anything, find anything that you like. And so that's just the path I'm on right now.
That's amazing. So, like, Kimberly, tell me, how do we find all the little 7-year-old Tianas out there and get them into Black Girls Code? Like, where are you guys kind of nationally, and how can folks who are watching today get involved in making sure that more girls get as excited about cybersecurity as we just saw Tiana?
Well, I first want to say I love hearing Tiana's story, because I think that it's so important that we give girls every opportunity to do all the things. So I love the fact that, Tiana, that you're both an athlete excelling in your career, but you're also, like, you're a multi-hyphenate. You're also a technologist, and you're interested you're a leader in social justice. I think that is what we are trying to build within Black Girls Code, is a Tiana, other Tianas, because our girls have so many different interests. And it's that introducing them to everything, so they see that there's no boundaries. They have options. So that's always what I say. I have one daughter, Kai, she's in college now, majoring in computer science. But when she was growing up, my really focus was to give her options, because options lead to opportunities. So all the things, so the box that she could play a chemistry set in, or Roblox, the little Lincoln Log blocks, and all the things I tried to introduce her to. So that's what we do within Black Girls Code. So we are a chapter-based organization, but we have 15 different chapters across the US. So Bay Area, New York, Atlanta, we have a chapter in DC. There are 15 chapters overall. We also have a chapter in Johannesburg as well. So once, hopefully soon, we're post-COVID, we'll be back in those cities doing workshops throughout the year. But for now, we're virtual. So, like, we could be anywhere. A student could log in from Canada, from Nigeria. We do have candidates all over that come into our virtual sessions from all over the world. So just going to our website, seeing what's available, and really encouraging your girls and your boys, because some of our work now is open to boys as well, to just try something and learn about something new, because they never know where they might find their really strong interest lies.
That's awesome. And I know, Tamika and Tiana, you're also really involved in getting young girls of color into STEM through the Demystifying STEM program. I love that name. So clever. So tell me, like, what is Demystifying STEM?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. And I think, at Deloitte, we recognize very quickly, and I had heard the CEO from Girls in Code who said, if you can see it, you can be it. So we recognize that it was really critical to sort of make it part of the community and what we were doing. So with Monumental Sports, we did Demystifying STEM with the Mystics, which was just amazing. We rolled out a program in Ward 8, and quite frankly, as the women and all of the kids actually were learning about STEM, they didn't even realize that they were learning it, right? They didn't know that they were, the circumference of a basketball was part of STEM and all of those things. So it was really, really exciting for us. We also recognize that having it within institutions is important. So we, as a firm, we adopted McKinley Tech High School in Washington, D.C., and we've done a lot of things there to help them, to expose them to STEM, because we also appreciate a lot of this is about exposure and knowing about it. Many of our kids don't know about STEM and what careers, and to Kimberly's point around opportunities, right? We don't know about these opportunities. So we have looked at this as an opportunity to really expose them to different opportunities. And while we recognize we're going to move into a world which is encompassed by a lot of artificial intelligence, the reality is even having the emotional competence and emotional quotient to have those conversations will still be critically important. So even though we're moving to be more high tech, it doesn't mean we're not going to be high touch as well. So that's important to us as well.
Ms. Kiana, can you tell me a little bit about your involvement with Demystifying STEM?
I haven't had too much involvement with COVID. So, but I'm looking
forward. Sorry, that makes sense.
So I'm looking forward to being more involved once everything goes back to a little bit of more normalcy.
Yeah. Once you're not, playing pro basketball, raising children, learning cybersecurity, like when you have a spare weekend somewhere.
And now that we know she codes, she'll be in charge of it.
Right?
Yes, I code.
I know that you all touched a little bit on the exposure issue, right? If you can't see it, how can you be it? What are the other obstacles that you're seeing that are, in front of young Black girls who want to get into STEM, and how do we eliminate those obstacles?
Any of us?
Anybody.
Okay.
Everybody.
I can jump in there. I think one of the things that we recognized during this period of being in quarantine and everyone sheltering in place at BGC was that the digital divide has never been wider. And that's not just for girls, that's for underrepresented communities of all demographics. And the access to both broadband, Wi-Fi, and internet, as well as equipment to learn the code. So you can't really learn Python like Tiana is doing on a cell phone. So you need a laptop. And, if you get into the more complex languages, you might need even a dip. You can't even just use a Chromebook. You need a more intensive device, if you will, to learn these things. So that was a barrier for some of our students this summer, that we actually had to send out and ship all across the U.S. equipment and laptops so the students could actually participate in the workshops and the summer programs that we did. So I think it's really critical as we go into this next political cycle, if you will, that really drive this notion of access to the internet for all, or access to technology for all. Because if you don't have access to technology, and we're in this new and emerging future, some of us are going to get left behind. And oftentimes that's communities of color. So really making sure that we even legislatively open up some of those barriers to access that are driven by access to internet, as well as the tools to really be a creator on it.
Yeah, no, and Kimberly, I absolutely agree with your points. I think for certain, within the pandemic has really brought to light the digital divide that we have, right? And the access to internet and technology. And so, one of the things that our foundation does, the Deloitte Foundation, is we really have looked at organizations that need our support. So during this time with COVID, we've sponsored 18 organizations so that they have places for people to access the internet so that we can make technology available to them. And we recognize that it's just disproportionately impacting Blacks in America. And so, to the extent that corporations can actually have an impact here, that is one place in which I think we really could stand up and do more.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you guys have touched a little bit here on the political cycle, on the pandemic within the pandemic. There's so many companies in our audience today who are trying to figure out, how do I authentically engage in social justice work, in racial equity work? And so what advice do you have for them? What have you seen that you thought was done well in the last few months? And what did you see maybe that you didn't think was done well?
That's a good question.
I know.
Tiana, you all have done
Tiana, you're next.
You're in the bubble.
Well, I touched on it earlier. It's just having a common ground is a start. Being visible and speaking up and speaking out. And I think from the first person to the last person have to be able to use their voice and use their platform for their voice to be heard. And I think that will come across a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I would absolutely agree with that. I think right at the beginning of all of this, I have a phenomenal CEO who was very clear that we could not remain silent during this, right? And so I think it's a matter of two things in terms of elevating women. Just do it. We spend so much time focused on like, how do we do it? What metrics are we going to put in place, et cetera? We make it so overly complicated that it scares people to take it on. And the reality is we know that there's an issue. We know we need to do it. So we need to take it on and we need to get it done, right? As it relates to other issues that are happening in America, specifically as it relates to Blacks, I think we had decided at Deloitte that we put together a Black Action Council and we sort of set up what we called this LEAD program. So we thought we needed to listen, we needed to engage, we needed to acknowledge what people were saying, and then we needed to act upon it, right? It was the thought was, let's jump in there and do something really quickly. Well, we recognized we really needed to be more thoughtful in this process because it was impacting everyone differently. So we have used that over the last 6 months to really make sure that we were focusing on how our people were performing. You know, we aren't selling widgets, it's the intellectual capacity of our people. So it's important that they are well and that they feel like they're in a company where they belong and is inclusive.
I would say we've had support over the last few months from so many different individuals and so many different organizations. I don't know if I could say that this one here is an example of how to do it right, but I would say the categories. So one of the things to sort of piggyback on Tiana's comment that I have really been impressed with is the power of individuals to step into the space and elevate this moment, like in their communities within their circles. So one of the things that happened that we noticed in June is that as the social justice protests started to happen all over the US, really, and all over the world, we started to get support from influencers, not just influencers that are celebrities like Tiana, but everyday influencers were doing campaigns, Bakers Against Racism. There are little kids in their communities in Maine doing a lemonade stand and they post it on Instagram. Like the influencers and the everyday individual and that support from that community was just astronomical. Like there were so many of them, we couldn't even keep up with them. And they'll send us letters with the money from the cookie sale that they did, and they'll have a little note in there. It's just been so amazing and heartwarming to see how individuals have taken their own power to create change in the world. And I think that's something that we can all do. We often think that it has to be big companies that do this, that, and the other, but as individuals, we also hold so much power. And then I think on the larger company side, the thing that I've seen that is done well is really giving support to those organizations that are on the ground, closest to these communities that need help and support the most, and really giving those founders who are often women, often people of color, that are often undercapitalized, especially in philanthropy. But we're doing a lot of the work. We're doing the heavy lifting of this social justice, social impact work, and really not a lot of resources to do it. So a lot of that support that we've gotten from larger companies to organizations like BGC and others that are really closest to our communities and doing this grassroots work is is a way to do philanthropy in a different frame than what we have normally see happen. And I think I hope that continues past this moment and really becomes a change in the system.
That's actually exactly what I wanted to ask next is how do we sustain the momentum of this moment?
Yes. It's a great question because we don't want this to be just now, right? While it's a hot topic, if you will. And, I think people like Kimberly who have been so bold and brilliant to start organization like Black Girls Who Code, who, have been very vocal about, the injustices and making sure that there's equity. I think continuing to have them dialogue at your organizations, continue to make sure that their voices are being heard, continuing to let other people get exposed to them, to hear Tiana's story. Those are the things that we want to make sure are continuing to happen, because as leaders, we have to have those empathetic conversations. We also have to make sure that we're being truly authentic, and being that way means that we're also exposing them to things that people may not have been exposed to previously.
I would add that I think we have to hold our leaders accountable. We have to hold our leaders accountable. I think that we are most definitely in a moment right now. We are in a moment. We're in the midst of this forest, but we're not on the other side. We're right in the midst of it. So we hear it. It's about how we get through and making sure that our leaders are out there clearing the pathway so that we can get to the other side. Because for me, I look at the work that I do, it's all about preparing these girls. I may not see these changes that I'm fighting for right now. I may not see those in my lifetime, but I want to make sure that my girls at BGC are truly capable when the moment arrives to step into their fullness as women and as leaders. But to do that, we got to hold these companies accountable. No, but it's great that you wrote a check once, but can you write that check next year as well? Same thing for these policies that we need to drive equity and social justice. We have to keep that pressure on our leaders to lead and to change these policies. So for me, this moment is just about us, clearing a pathway for a better future. And I think that work is a long way from being done.
Tiana, anything you wanted to add?
Just to add to what Kimberly said, and I don't want to be cliche, but when you're talking about policy and the leaders' standpoint, we also have to put people in that position by voting to get those policy passed, because we need those right people that know what we need as African American females and males. We need those people in position for us to be successful.
And so what policy changes, are there any either particular, it sounds like definitely, voter registration and getting out the vote, stopping voter suppression is something that's important to you, Tiana. Are there particular policies that any of you are really focused on right now? I know, Kimberly, you also mentioned kind of policy change.
Yeah, I there's just so many. So when I look at the issues that we're dealing with right now, these are systemic issues, right? Systemic issues. So there's so many policies that needs to be changed. I think, one of the most prevalent that really brought us to this moment is this issue around brutality and police brutality and how that negatively impacts communities of color. And there are policies in place that negatively impact communities of color. So I think for one, that is a clear place to start, because I'm doing work in the community that focuses on education, but I'm working with families who are impacted by this discrimination that they face in the criminal justice system. So I cannot put a blinder up to that, because, this is the people that I serve, and those issues are important as well. So for me, I look at it as a holistic approach. Yes, I want some policies that directly impact education and educational access, but I also want leaders that represent the fullness of the issues that are most important to the Black community.
We gotta vote.
No, I love it. And you are right. And, Hannah, I think too, just as a general thought around sort of policy, I won't necessarily go there, but just talk about in our offices as well. Like, I think it's important that we find allies, right? It's always been critically important to have affinity groups, but how about allies within those groups? So if you have your Black Action group or you have, LGBTQ, having those allies that can have those conversations, that can, stand up for things that they think are inappropriate. I think that will start to be the game changer for all of us. We've always focused so much on making sure that we have groups that can discuss things that they have in common, but it also is critically important that you have allies that you bring along, because oftentimes we're not in the room when the statements are being made, right? And so if you can make sure that there are other people that can support you and can make sure that people recognize that there is a problem or a concern, I think that would go a long way. And I hope that won't stop at this moment.
Yeah, you took the question right out of my mouth, because what I wanted to ask next was, how can white men, white women, and men of color be better allies to Black women in sport, in STEM, in society writ large?
Well, the biggest thing, I'll take that one. But I think the biggest one, most important, is having an ally. The second thing is speaking up, but I don't think it should stop at speaking up. They also have to help act on it. I mean, we can do so much because we're not in the position of power. They can use their white privilege for good, with being our voice also and acting on it.
No, absolutely agree.
I would also say make space. So I think when we look at opportunities, talent is equally distributed, but opportunities and access to some of these opportunities is not. So I think that, we often talk about like bringing your chair into the room if there's not space for you. But I often want to add to that is like, somebody may need to give up a seat. So like, some of these white men, they need to give up a seat so that a woman can sit in it, so that a Black woman can sit in it. Some brothers may need to give up a seat so a Black woman can sit in it. So one of the reasons, I'll circle back to Tiana and what the WNBA has done as social justice advocates. Like we often see, like, I love the NBA, but we often see all of the things that they do when they do things. But the WNBA has been doing this. Like, they have been leading. They have been leading. And I think that is what women do. And that's certainly what Black women do. And I want to see more of that, so we tend as a society to elevate the voice of the man or the male, whereas women are in the background doing all this work. And I want to see, more focus on this work that the WNBA and women in leadership have been doing for a very long time. And I would call on our brothers to make space so that their voices can be heard.
Really done an amazing job. You've been given a platform. They always say, to whom much is given, much is expected. And, I really do believe that the women have done just a phenomenal job. I mean, really, the women, the men, the coaches, all of the things that we have seen, even in the bubble, have been significant. And you could have used that to raise yourself up or to be, focused on what you were doing. And instead, I think you've gone beyond that, which is, something that really, quite honestly, is extraordinary, a real great example to be set for so many people. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Tiana, just to maybe ask you to give us a little more detail on that experience, because I think all of us do look and see, like, following the shooting of Jacob Blake, probably one of the most powerful images was the WNBA players coming together, wearing the shirts that had the 7 bullet holes in the back. Can you tell us a little bit about how do you all work together across teams and as this coalition of women to come to decisions like that?
Okay. Well, I'll try not to go into too much detail, but I could just tell you, what happened. So, we have the Jacob Blake shooting. And so it was the day of the game. I think I think we had a game maybe 2 or 3 days after the shooting had actually happened. And our Coach Mike Tebow, had pulled us all together in a team meeting and said, we have to say something. We have to use our voice. And he gave us time between shoot around and the game to come up with how we can have our voice be heard. And our first decision was to wear the shirt with the bullet holes, with his name spelled out. And then we saw that the guys had chose to sit out. And so on the way to the game, us as a team made a decision, that we wanted to sit out and have a conversation to figure out what it is we need to do for our voice to be heard, and to just get the public to know that we are human. We are affected by this too. We understand, we are hurting too. And so it was maybe 2 or 3 other teams that had joined us into this conversation. And so we all, agreed that we're going to take the time to sit, reflect, and have a conversation about it.
Yeah. And, Hannah, you asked the question earlier about sort of what can others do. I love, Tiana, that you started the story with Mike Tebow saying, like, what do you want to do? Because oftentimes when you said, what is it that white men can do, right? It is giving you the platform, right? He wasn't coming at you to say, I have all of the answers, but rather, I want you to think about it. And I want this to be something that you all feel comfortable with. And I love that. He's an amazing man anyway, but I just think that that's a pivotal example of someone doing the right thing at the right time.
Yes.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I love that. I think that is what the mark of a great ally is not to come with the answers, to ask the folks that are closest to whatever the issue is for the answer, and then make it possible for them to, step into the light. I love that. I love it.
And I think that's really the perfect note to end on today. That's an amazing story for us to end on. I'm so honored to have shared a screen with the 3 of you. I know that our whole audience has really enjoyed this and learned a lot. So I hope that it activates all of you in the audience to listen to Tiana and not only speak up, but act. And so thank you all so much for this wonderful panel.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.